Hello, everyone, and welcome NCORE family. Thank you for joining the Setting Our Compass webinar series. My name is Dedrick K. Perkins, and I use any and all pronouns. I am a Black identifying person. I am wearing a mustard colored t-shirt that says Black Queer Black Joy. Wearing red glasses, and I'm in front of a green background with lots of art and African art behind it, in front of it. I am the senior program coordinator for the Southwest Center for Human Relations Studies at a department of the University of Oklahoma Outreach and the home of the National Conference on Race and Ethnicity and Higher Education in Norman, Oklahoma. I am delighted to welcome you and to be your host this afternoon. As we set sail toward NCORE 2024 in Honolulu, Hawaii, we invite you to embark on a transformative journey with our 7-part Setting Our Compass webinar series. This series serves as your navigational guide, providing historical context and contemporary insights to enrich your NCORE experience. Whether you're a seasoned conference attendee or a first-time explorer, these webinars will set the course for meaningful engagement, learning, growth, and connection. Today is part 6 of the series. All of the webinars in this series will be free of charge, and today's webinar will be recorded and available to you on our YouTube channel shortly. So search for NCORE on YouTube and like and subscribe to our channel. The next webinar will be led by the Asian American and Pacific Islander and Latinx NCORE caucuses, where they'll be discussing how to maximize your NCORE experience. This webinar will broadcast today, May 16th at 10 a.m. Hawaiian Standard Time, which is 3 p.m. Central Standard Time. Before we get started, I would like to go over a few housekeeping items. If you need to utilize closed captioning, make sure your settings are set to on. Always remain muted unless you are requested to unmute. Excuse me. We ask that your background have no moving images or flashing lights. Please report any specific tech, accessibility, and any other operational concerns via direct message to me, the session host. The presenters will take questions periodically during the session, but please feel free to use the Q&A box so that the questions can be held to be answered at the end of the session. Today's webinar is led by Vanessa Aviva Gonzalez-Siegel and Michael Akeem Riley, who are the QT-POC caucus leaders. They will be discussing gender expansiveness at NCORE. Vanessa Aviva Gonzalez-Siegel, she, her, ella, is a first-generation Cuban-American born in New York City. She is a proud queer and trans Latina. She currently serves as the Associate Director of Multicultural Affairs and LGBTQ Outreach at Columbia University, where she oversees LGBTQ student life for undergraduate students. She is the QT-POC caucus co-chair at NCORE. Vanessa serves on the board of directors for the New York Transgender Advocacy Group, an organization that creates gender-based legislation and policy that benefit women, transgender, and non-binary people in the state of New York. Vanessa holds a BA in Women's Gender and Sexuality Studies and Social Justice Education from Rutgers University, New Brunswick, and an MA in Higher and Post-Secondary Education from Teachers College, Columbia University. She is currently a doctoral student at the City University of New York in Organizational Leadership, Development, and Change. Michael Akeem Riley, any and all pronouns, is a liberatory inclined educator currently laboring at the University of Minnesota Twin Cities in Minneapolis, Minnesota, as the director of the Gender and Sexuality Center for Queer and Trans Life. Michael has had the privilege to work at the intersections gender identity, gender expression, sexuality, and race and ethnicity in a multitude of ways, including but not limited to DePaul University's LGBTQ PIA+ Resource Center Coordinator, Assistant Director of the LGBT Resource Center at Syracuse University, and in classrooms teaching courses such as Intro to LGBTQ Studies, Queer Chicago, and more. Outside of the ivory tower, Michael continues to strive for those on the margins, particularly as a founding member of the Black Agenda, a collective indexing Black and queer experiences based in Chicago but beyond. In addition, Michael deeply enjoys thrift shopping, talking about taboo topics, gospel music, and book clubs. Please welcome Michael Akeem Riley and Vanessa Aviva Gonzalez-Siegel.
Hi everyone. How's it going? First and foremost, I just want to say thank you all for being here. I know as we are preparing for NCORE, time is of the essence. Many school years are ending. There's lots of heaviness in the world, both in the United States and beyond. So I just want to acknowledge that you spending even an hour with us means a lot, when you could be doing something else. So I just want to say thank you for being here. And um, hopefully this webinar can feel a little bit more like a Weber conversation, to make up that word, so that we can be in conversation. I'm not asking you folks to turn the cameras off or on, whatever feels most comfy, cozy to you, but we would be really excited to be in conversation with you all. Um, so yeah, that's what I wanted to say first and foremost, and then maybe we can jump to some of those community guidelines. I don't know, Vanessa, if you want, do you want me to drop them in there and then we can start? Do you want to take
Yeah,
like the
if you can drop the community guidelines into the chat with everyone, and then I'll walk everyone through them.
perfect? I'll do that. Can folks see that in the chat? Okay, I
Yes,
saw I
there's some
saw one
there.
thumb. So then one thumb is good enough. Take it away, Vanessa.
All right, perfect. Thank you, Michael. Hello, everyone. Good morning, good evening, good afternoon from wherever you're Zooming and joining us from. Um, really appreciate you all being here. It is a very busy time in higher education and leading up to NCORE, so we really appreciate you taking the time. Um, Michael and I facilitate a lot of space leading up to and during NCORE, and all the spaces that we facilitate, we really want to value folks contributing, being in conversation with us, and also creating a space where everyone can kind of participate in. And so to kind of work towards that mission, we do have some guidelines that we like to utilize when in discussion and conversations. So the first one is move up, move back. Um, I like to just describe that as, everyone, whether you're an active listener or active speaker, we encourage you to participate, whether that's asking questions in the Q&A, putting things in the chat, messaging either of us or both of us in the chat. We have all of that open, so we will be able to engage with you. And we encourage folks to participate. I know for myself, when I'm not a speaker, I'm usually I'm introverted, so I'm quite silent and I'm kind of in the background, but I always try to encourage myself to move up and take up space and ask questions. Similarly, if you are an individual that is very vocal, very engaged, that's great. We love that. We just ask that you be mindful and move back sometimes to allow for other folks to also engage with us. The next piece is using I statements, really just speaking from your own experiences, not sharing other people's stories or identities without their consent or knowledge, but really thinking about, what are the experiences that you hold and what are the things that you want to learn. Next is call in, call out, challenge ideas, not people. Um, in this space and in a lot of conversations around gender expansiveness, LGBTQIA plus identity and experiences, oftentimes there's a dynamic where there's folks feel hesitant to engage and participate for fear of using incorrect language or inappropriate phrasing. With Michael and I try really intentionally to create a space where if that happens, right, if someone uses verbiage or words that they unintentionally cause harm or are inaccurate, we will do a process of challenging the idea but not the person, right? So being like, I just want to name that there was an impact about that statement, and we'll model more appropriate and affirming language as a moment of education, but also to understand that everyone has areas of growth, and if you are within an area of growth, that is not a measure or a judgment on you personally, but more of how can we grow together and how can we engage with the idea that is being put forward. Next is try on the process. Michael's also a stylist, so that's really on brand. Try it on. For a lot of folks, we never assume that folks have had access to these types of conversations or spaces, whether it's this webinar or NCORE more broadly. And this may be new. Our facilitation style and the way in which we're going to navigate this space may be different and new for folks. And so we really encourage you to lean in and participate and try it on and engage with us. And what's said, and last is what's said here stays here and what's learned here leaves here. Interesting because it's a recorded session. However, this is a space to learn, to ask questions, to engage, so that you all are prepared to engage in NCORE as a community. We'll talk a little bit about what we mean by gender expansiveness and why we felt that it was important to focus this conversation prior to the conference itself. But we want folks to feel safe that, you know, we will not be taking notes on who says what and then run up and find you in Honolulu and be like, you said this and you shouldn't have said that and da 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 da. It's really about, thank you so much. If folks are sharing things, all of that, it's really about what are you learning and how can Michael and I do the best that we can to facilitate new knowledge and new comfort for you all in this conversation, in these topics, and in these spaces. Michael, is there anything else that you wanted to add?
The only thing, first off, thank you, Vanessa, for that. The only thing I wanted to add is this may feel unnecessary, but if you at any point need to like step away for a variety of reasons, if you are, you know, a work emergency happens, I don't know, your child or friend knocks over a plant in your room, if you just need to go to the bathroom, if something in here like confuses you or maybe triggers you and you need to take a step away, please take care of yourself. We are only together for an hour, so we're not going to build in an opportunity for a break. However, we will make sure that we are, you have the autonomy to do whatever you need. So if it means you need to, you know, if you have your camera on and then you're like, actually, I want to turn it off, that's okay. If you are going to keep your camera off the whole time, we love that. If you need to go to the bathroom at a break or go get some more water, like feel free to step away and do those things and take care of yourself before you attempt to do some of that hard work of thinking inclusively, thinking about gender expansiveness at NCORE. You know, to do a lot of that, I think you need to at least be hydrated. So take care of yourself first and foremost. I also wanted to check in from these community agreements. Is there anything that you all as our community also would like to bring up to our space? Any kind of guidelines that you feel like would help you feel brave and empowered in this space? And if not, can I have virtual or thumbs or a yes in the chat to make sure that you agree to these guidelines? Awesome, I'm seeing some folks in the chat. I'm seeing some thumbs. This is awesome. Okay, great, cool.
Great.
Do you mind, Vanessa, if I throw in another set of questions for our community since we're a little smaller? I would love to just maybe get a little bit of what folks are here for, who they're here for, and just a little bit of ground setting for them too, as we shared some guidelines and a little bit about ourselves.
Absolutely, go right ahead.
Cool. So I'm going to throw this in the chat. I'm not asking people to unmute and share this out loud, but just some questions for us to think about as we begin to think about gender expansiveness and also thinking particularly about the experiences of QT-POC folks, or I oftentimes will say Black, Brown, and Indigenous queer communities. As Dedrick shared, both Vanessa and I have the esteemed privilege as the co-chairs for the QT-POC Caucus, which is a space at NCORE exclusively for Black, Brown, and Indigenous queer people to kind of be together. We meet twice during the conference, and it's one of my highlights of my time at NCORE. It brings together a lot of folks, a lot of sense of community, also sometimes some heaviness and hardship, but also a lot of beauty. And so we'll be doing a lot of thinking about those intersections of thinking about QT-POC individuals. And so I wanted to kind of get us started with some things in here. So I'm going to throw this in the chat. And if folks want to answer these questions in the chat, or if you feel empowered to like unmute yourself and maybe share some of that, we'll do this. And I know we only have so much time, but I do think it's so important for us to kind of see who's in the space and what you're hoping to get. So folks want to share their name and pronouns, like why you're here, if something you're hoping to glean. And if your vibe was a color, how you're feeling, what you're bringing into the space. And then also if you want to share your relationship to QT-POC communities / movement makers on your campuses, in your offices, and beyond. So if you want to share any of that, I'll read some out loud. I might not get a chance to read every single one, but just wanted folks to be able to bring themselves into this space too. So thank you, Brianna, for being our first person to jump in there. And I think while we also are kind of waiting for folks to add more in the chat, I also wanted to just give a little bit of some context about gender expansiveness and the QT-POC community at NCORE, how long the caucus has been along. I'm bad at numbers, but I am good at remembering where we were. So the caucus started in the first little bits of it started with the thinking of Takesha Morgan. I want to uplift her name. She's a Black queer woman who got the caucus going. The year was 2009. We were in San Diego. I was a first year, going into my sophomore year, and Takesha really wanted to bring people together and wanted to bring queer communities together because there's always been, which is another conversation for another day, a large contingency of Black, Brown, Indigenous, queer people at NCORE / in higher education. That in itself was already like an interesting thing for us to think about. And so initially, Takesha brought together all queer people. But as that was happening, folks were like, we probably need a space explicitly for Black, Brown, and Indigenous folks to queer people to kind of come together. And so the next year, that was like the first time the caucus came together. And it was in her hands until, when did we step in, Vanessa? Was that 2016?
You stepped in 15, and then I joined 2016.
Yes. And so Vanessa and I have been co-chairing since 2016, and I stepped in as chair solo dolo, and I was like, this is a lot. So I asked Vanessa, who we do a lot of work together outside of just the caucus. We do several presentations on QT-POC experiences, both as Black and brown queer people ourselves, which kind of got us to where we are today. And I'll be the first to say that there's been a lot of progress made at NCORE. There's also still a lot of space for progress to continue to be made, ranging from all gender bathrooms, needing more of them, making sure there's space for the caucus. There's a lot of things, but we've done a lot of work, and I'm really appreciative of NCORE allowing us to continue to grow. So now we even have something, a part of our setting our compass. Oh, wait, someone turned
There's a
the
few responses in the chat, Michael, if you want
Oh, they
to
are?
start moving through.
Yeah. Do you want to go? I can get to the top. Here we go. I'll start. Yes, Ramos uses she, her. My vibe is a cool navy blue, expanding your knowledge. I'm respectful of everyone, but always seeking to learn more. As an ally, especially with my work and student life at my university. I love that. Kristen says cisgender hetero, all pronouns intersectional ally with a rainbow. We love that. Thank you. Tasha, she, her, blue. Here's an opportunity to learn more. Elena, she, her, fuchsia, aqua. Oh, that's a pretty
That's
combination.
gorgeous.
Corbin Maroon, oversee over 100+ students at UO campus, looking for knowledge and furthering my education on QT-POC communities. To welcome to the spaces. Oh wait, I also see someone turned their camera on. Lauren, was that you attempting to
Hi, Lauren.
yourself?
I just wanted to share my face.
Oh, I appreciate that. That's so great. So I might not get to every single person's, but yeah, there's some good things in here. Thank you all for thinking deeply with us. I want to be mindful of time, so we may not get to read every single person's, but I really, really appreciate you all sharing in the chat. Vanessa, do you want to chat a little bit about the term gender expansiveness?
Yes.
And why we use that as opposed to maybe other languages, other definitions? Yeah.
Absolutely, absolutely. So Michael and I, we do a lot of work together within NCORE and outside of NCORE. And one of the things that we do within NCORE is we facilitate a pre-conference institute called Intersectional Interventions, where we talk about, and it's really an intensive, it's an 8-hour intensive that helps folks working with higher education students on how to support QT-POC students in higher ed as they navigate institutions. And something that we frame, one of the first things we say when folks are in the room after we say thank you for coming, we let folks know that this is not a conversation around terms. This is not a conversation where we're going to give you note cards and we're going to quiz you. In my work at Columbia, I frame a lot of my educational work around, yes, terms are important, but a term and a definition, they're kind of like zip codes or a postal code. When you know someone's zip code, you may have a general sense of where that person lives, right? You may recognize the neighborhood, you may be able to figure out the town, but to really get to know where they live, you need to get their full address, right? You need to have a full conversation and build a relationship with that person. And so when we were thinking about doing this webinar and thinking about, do we do LGBTQ at NCORE? Do we frame it as queerness and transness, or do we frame it as gender expansiveness at NCORE? And there's so many layers as to why we intentionally use gender expansiveness within the language of the title. One of the reasons is when we think about LGBTQ inclusion, and particularly for cutie POC folks, we're really thinking about systems of power. We're thinking about how are institutions set up that create particular realities for students who live in the margins, right? For folks who are holding multiple marginalized and targeted identities. And how are we expanding and creating space for them, right? How are we being mindful of the gendered expectations, whether that be through professional dress, that be how folks present and introduce themselves at a professional conference, right? How folks engage within a virtual setting, right? With higher education has a hierarchy, right? And there is an expectation of performance that has particular implications for Black, Brown, Indigenous folks, and also Black, Brown, Indigenous folks who are also trans and queer. And so there's so many layers to that, and that the expansiveness of it, of using the term expansiveness, allows for us to create room to talk about all of those things, right? Let's talk about race and gender and class and white supremacy and colonialism, because those are all a part of our contemporary context that we are navigating in what we call now the United States of America.
Can I jump in for 1
Oh,
second?
go ahead.
I want to say something that I just been thinking about as we prepare for some of our own presentations, Vanessa. I also noted, or I know that our community, Vanessa and I, and the rest of the folks I present with, Romeo Jackson, Nathan Wynn, who aren't with us, but are with us in spirit, we've moved to using the term gender expansiveness explicitly, and you touched on this, Vanessa, when you started talking about colonization, because I do want to be clear that when thinking about these communities, these folks who have existed outside of our binary, particularly in these Black and Brown and Indigenous spaces, they were existing in ways that our current binary and even I hate to say a little trinary now, including they, them sort of in that space, have existed outside of those for such a long time. And so I know sometimes people, when we start thinking about, different communities like the Hydra, Two-Spirit individuals, folks would just be like, oh yeah, that's just trans people in insert place. In India, those are trans people in, indigenous communities. And that's not the same. The way that they were thinking about their gender identity, thinking about all those things, it was expansive of the ways we think about that. And so I think using gender expansiveness also reminds us of those long histories of Black, Brown, Indigenous, queer people who are, complicating and queering gender way before, Laverne Cox was on the cover of Time magazine. Important step, right? But this is not, it's something new. And I think it's really easy for us to think it is new. So I want to be clear around some of that as well, that we are looking at colonization, which has a really explicit kind of relationship to the elimination of queer folks. But that's another workshop for another day at NCORE, but I just wanted to name that that's sort of part of, I know why we use gender expansiveness as well.
Right. And that's also, we were presenting a workshop on the role of colonialism in queer and trans antagonism during NCORE. And the last thing I was going to say, Michael, I was just going to say all of that. The last thing I'll say around the titling is that oftentimes, I know in my work at Columbia, there's always a conversation of, oh, we're only going to talk about gender and sexuality when we're thinking about LGBTQ students. And we're only going to talk about pronouns in this dynamic. We're only going to use pronouns in this space. But in reality, gender, everyone has a gender identity. Everyone has a gender expression. Everyone who's currently living within the United States is impacted and having to navigate gendered expectations and systems. And so these conversations that talk about gender expansiveness actually support and work towards freeing all of us,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Thank you, Vanessa, for that. Absolutely. Do we, oh, my screen went away. Oh, I also will name in the chat, you'll see a few book recommendations that I'll throw in throughout our time together. Please feel free to take a look at some of these. These are all texts I think that are really beneficial to like think about gender expansiveness, the interplay and intersections of race, identity, gender expression, etc. So there'll be a few that'll be tossed in there, and if any folks are interested, um, this is one way to kind of tap into those. Can we stop for a second and maybe check in if folks have questions, thoughts, feelings about anything that was kind of shared here? You can direct message us. You could maybe even throw it into is there a Q&A? No, it's not one of those. You can throw it in the chat. You can ask us individually and we can read it aloud. If you have any questions about anything. I know we gave like a very brief history of some QTPOC things at NCORE and also, some broader macro structured things as well. So I want to make sure there's space in case folks do have any particular questions.
No, Lauren says no questions, just gratitude. Christine says, you've already helped me see that I will need to unpack my session title to my audience. Okay. Riley says the gender binary is new, gender fluidity and expansion is not. Absolutely.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. This is glad to hear that any of the thinking has happened thus far. Should we chat a little bit about the experience at NCORE and folks, or how exactly? Yeah, let's start there.
Yeah, let's start there.
Do you want to start? Or do you want me to go?
You can start, and then I'll probably jump in and add some extra anecdotes.
So if I was a more thought out person, I'd show you my like NCORE badge that has like the different tags and things, but I didn't think about that until I sat down and my dog's in my lap, so we're not going to get up. So I'll share a little bit about what gender expansiveness can look like at NCORE to give people some context, because I will be transparent that I meet a lot of students and also practitioners in higher education, both grad students, newer practitioners, folks who have been in the field for a long time who maybe have a lot of anxieties about what would that look like for us? What does it look like for me as a, trans or non-binary person kind of maneuvering through that space? I know when you register, you have opportunities to like add your pronouns and things, but kind of what else is there. So you'll see when you check in, you'll be able to get some tags or what is the explicit name of those? Not tags.
It's like ribbons at the bottom of the badge.
Ribbon. That's a ribbon that you'll be able to add that. We'll have more things. There's, I think, one that historically said like you can ask for my pronouns if you didn't maybe add those, or if maybe your pronouns have changed, to understand that like pronouns do change. You also at the onset will also be shown where all gender bathrooms are. Vanessa and I and the NCORE team, particularly working closely with Dedrick and Justin, have done some work to make sure that there are ample all gender bathrooms that are open to everyone, that have both urinals and stalls. There will be 2 of them in the main kind of space where a lot of the workshops will go. I will name that because this is a larger NCORE and folks are staying at a variety of hotels. I can't say what it'll look like at all hotels, but I will say the one that we'll be in for most of our workshops. Yeah, most of the workshops, we're all in the convention center. There'll be 2 in the main kind of hallway area. There will also be language in those bathrooms. That will be really explicit about why these all gender bathrooms exist, what this means. And if folks have questions, to reach out to the QTPOC caucus or the NCORE staff. And I'll ask you all that if you see anything, please let any of us know. If you see Vanessa and I, or please let people know. But there will be 2 all gender bathrooms that I think are centrally located, multi-stall, multi-use. And I'll be transparent that I know for some people, this is like very exciting. And for other people, maybe it's not as exciting, because maybe you've had some unique interactions in those spaces. Unfortunately, I wish everyone everyone was on board and maybe has, had opportunities to think through things around gender identity and gender expression. And I know that that's just not the case. So there may be some moments of like some unique interactions. I've even had people, and I'm, the chair of the QT caucus, have had many presentations about this at NCORE, who will not unknowing to me will be like, oh, I'm a little nervous about all gender bathrooms,
Yeah.
or like, I don't use that. And, in those conversations, I oftentimes will say like, well, what is the nerves? What is the fear about, right? They're like, I don't like sharing a bathroom with boys because boys are messy. And I'm like, well, that's weird because I know a lot of messy people across the gender spectrum. And also many homes have bathrooms that are, shared amongst all types of genders. But to know that this, although we have made a lot of progress, this doesn't mean that every single person in that space is going to inherently tap in to that. So that is two of the things that you'll know. You'll also be able to get connected if you are a member of, Black, Brown, Indigenous, queer person, to get connected with the caucus. I will throw the caucus email in the chat at some point, and you'll be able to get connected with us. We have a variety of other tools, a list of restaurants and spaces that are like queer affirming or queer owned, that we'll share with folks, and as well as a not as active, but a little active, so maybe you want to mute it, WhatsApp group. Some people are into them, some people aren't, but those are a few tools that what it means to like actually be a member of, transgender expansive communities coming to NCORE. I want to give a pause if there's any questions and concerns about what I've shared so far. And the all gender bathrooms, I don't know if I said this part, will be like explicitly located on the map in the booklet, as well as on the app, which I know you'll be able to access as well. Anything I missed, Vanessa, that you feel like is more logistical?
Not so much logistical. I was gonna pause for questions or folks wanted to add anything before I talk also a little bit about it, like a little bit around intersectionality and gender and how that plays into NCORE.
Absolutely, yeah.
But I'm gonna
So
wait a few seconds for folks in case folks do have questions or want to pop in. Well, seeing nothing in the chat and no hands. Michael and I also wanted to talk a little bit about, gender expansiveness and NCORE. Yes, it is also around, right, accessible facilities, being able to fully be present and participate in the conference experience. There is sometimes, NCORE is a beautiful space. It has been my conference home for 10 years. And also we're not removed from larger dynamics within higher education, DEI in particular. And so oftentimes there is sometimes maybe rhetoric from some folks that are part of the conference around, why is this here? This is a conference around race. This is a conference about ethnicity and sovereignty. Why is there an all gender restroom? Why are they asking my pronouns during registration? Why are there rainbow flags on people's tags? This is not that kind of conference. I really want to shout out the NCORE team, Dedrick Perkins, Stephanie Sellier, Justin Langs, who've really been intentional about working with us and other members of the NCORE community to really think about different interventions to make NCORE a safer space for queer and trans QT BIPOC practitioners, because we've always been at NCORE. There has always been Black, Brown, and Indigenous practitioners who are also trans and queer doing movement work within the NCORE space, and sometimes have moved in silence, sometimes have had to make different decisions in terms of safety and self-preservation. But conversations around gender, space around sexuality and transness and queerness are not new and are just as foundational to the conversation and the work and the objective of the NCORE conference. As Riley put in the chat, right, the gender binary is new, gender fluidity and expansion is not. I always like to say in my work that white supremacy is like a tree, right? The root is white supremacy. There's a trunk, and then in the leaves, there's racism, there's classism, there's elitism, there's transphobia, there's queer antagonism. It's all connected. And so the NCORE team has created over the past, I think 2 years or 3 years, there's been these really amazing signs around like, what does inclusion mean at NCORE? And you'll see them on like a I don't know what the right word it is in English. But like stands around the conference, and it'll have, you know, ableism, classism, race, ethnicity, immigration, and it'll talk about here's what we mean when we say diversity and inclusion at NCORE and what NCORE centers. And so for us, this work is not new. The NCORE space has always been a space for folks to gain knowledge on transness, queerness, and the work of QT BIPOC practitioners. And also there is that dynamic where folks, there are some conference attendees that are not as comfortable engaging in conversation and who may feel like these conversations should be separated. But I'll speak for myself. I think they're inextricably connected to one another. I can't take off being Cuban or take off being a trans woman. Like they just exist simultaneously in me and in my lived experience and in my reality. I can't take off that I'm the child of immigrants. I cannot take off that I am a trans woman. I cannot take off that I am Latina. Those are things that are inherently a part of me that follow me in all spaces. And that's a lot of the work Michael and I try to do through the caucus, and also a lot of other folks like Takesha Morgan, who founded the caucus and who still sometimes comes to NCORE. Will not be there this year, but is, you know, she pops in and out every other year. Want to do. And so we also want to share that so folks can prepare for those particular pieces. We do have some exciting things coming out this year. Stay tuned. Beyond all-inclusive restroom signage and pieces that kind of are going to create more space at NCORE. But we wanted to also just talk a little bit about what that looks like coming into NCORE. I started attending NCORE as an undergraduate student. And I remember my mentor in undergrad telling me that this is not an LGBT conference, but there will be a lot of LGBTQ folks there. And I didn't really understand what that meant as a 21-year-old. Coming into the space, I understood what that meant. However, there is such a broad breadth of options, of workshops, of keynotes, of seminars, the caucus that Michael and I facilitate, where there is space to engage in these conversations and with these practitioners. In the soon, I don't know if it's next week or within the program booker in the app, there's actually going to be a like session track that folks can utilize and look through to really prioritize and look through workshops and topics, and, you know, discussions and caucus times and salons, which Michael can talk more about what those are, that are around LGBTQ, QT BIPOC experiences, realities, experiences within higher education, and more. So I hope that context is helpful. I want to acknowledge I'm holding a lot of space, so I want to pause for any questions that folks may have. And then, Michael, I don't know if you want to jump in to talk a little bit about the work we do with the conference.
Not yet, but I do think maybe someone just turned the camera on. So
Corbin, I think Corbin?
Yeah, I had a quick question. I was listening, and one of the problems that you mentioned was the white supremacy is like a root of an issue. And I was wondering, just in my perspective of disabling that in its entirety, is there any strategies or effective ways that you've been able to disable the fear within the root of white supremacy in order to, I don't know, maybe engage in a different way?
Michael, if you want to go first, and then I'll add on.
Yeah, it's really easy. No, I'm just kidding. It's not.
No, it's not.
I do appreciate the question on like how do we move past like a white supremacist kind of framing. I'll be transparent. I think that white supremacy, you know, and all these hegemonic structures are very insidious and smart. So I think about it less as like here is the one way to like eliminate, you know, white supremacy, to get rid of that tree. I suppose there's, you know, interventions and things you can kind of do, or practices even. But I think even in those practices, like creating some space to know that it is a practice. And although you may be like really solid at it, because white supremacy, in my opinion, is really smart and insidious, and may try and manifest in different ways. For example, I'll give an example. I've been working a lot on this this year. So at the University of Minnesota, Twin Cities, where I work, we have had an influx, like many of our institutions, of transgender expansive folks, on campus. And one of the workarounds a couple years ago was to convert every single all gender bathroom or every single family bathroom, single stall, single room kind of occupancy kind of space to now all be trans bathrooms or all gender bathrooms that are, directed. And I hope that trans and gender expansive folks will be able to use those bathrooms, right? And it's like very great. There's tons all over campus, et cetera, et cetera. Because white supremacy is very smart and insidious, a new tension that exists now is that because we have more students and more community members identifying as transgender, expansive, et cetera, these single occupancy bathrooms don't cut it, right? So initially, I think this solve that we had worked at one point, now does not work, right? And so now we're back at the drawing board and have failed, not like in a way that we didn't try, but now that tool just doesn't work anymore. So now we are in the process of figuring out, okay, how do we make sure we're creating multi-stall, multi-use all gender bathrooms so that our communities can use those. And then as we do that, making sure that those aren't, it's a large public institution, so making sure that they aren't located only on one side of campus, but on both sides of campus. And it's, we'll do that. And we're probably going to be able to create a couple of those this summer, but that won't still be an end all, tool to get rid of, or not get rid of, to make sure that everyone has access to all those bathrooms. It's going to become a longer process. And even once we do that, I'm sure there'll be other issues that happen, right? Around disability or things of that nature. So for me, it's less of a investment in how do I eliminate this in like forever, but more like how do I do this practice in real time where I'm able to work on this now, get to this place now, be prepared for that to be inefficient at some point, and then get back to the ground, excited and invested to continue to try and do work. That maybe sounds like sort of a Debbie Downer answer, but that's sort of how I approach a lot of my work and thinking about white supremacy.
Yeah.
V, I don't know if you want to answer too.
Yeah, I would just add that I know in my work, I think a lot about, in my work, I do everything from programming to institutional advocacy, education, all these different things. I'm always thinking about systems and power. I'm thinking about how do policies, systems, and processes create the material reality of students? And then how are those processes creating realities for the most marginalized, right? Where I'm constantly thinking about the most marginalized student within this particular context. And I'm thinking about, yes, we're going to have a program and we're going to have a speaker, and that's going to be great. But how am I bringing what's happening in that space and what's happening with students into the meeting with the VP of facilities to talk about bathrooms? How am I thinking about the history of the institution that I work at and the legacy, and how am I moving to identify the colonial legacies of I work at a former colonial college, right? I live in an Ivy League institution. Those legacies still live on in the mature reality of marginalized students. And it lives on through policies, practice, and procedure. And a lot of that is what we've seen this year at Columbia, if folks watch the news. And those things are real, right? It's for me, it's not a conceptual, idea. Like it is a real thing. White supremacy manifests physically within our spaces. And it does that through policy, procedure, and practice. And how do I, as a part of the system, right? I am employed and I do have a job, a title, and a salary. How do I understand where I am situated within the system? And then what can I do to change those policies, practices, and procedures? Thank you for your question, Corbin. Are there other questions from folks? Seeing none. Michael, do you want to go ahead? Michael, you're muted.
Oops. There we go. Thank you, Vanessa. So I'm gonna throw into the chat the email for the QT Caucus as I share a smidge more about what are some of the things we have coming up and other ways to stay connected to us. One thing I think that's always really beneficial, and I'm not done with it yet because it's going to take some time, is we've worked really hard with the program team at NCORE to have a expansive and extensive list of all the workshops, presentations, anything at all that is connected to QT-POC experiences, ranging from workshops to poets to, you know, pre-cons, all those things. We are going to have an expansive list of all those that we'll share with anyone. Obviously, we know that with travel and things, some of those workshops and things may not happen, but we'll share that expansive list with everyone. And we've always worked on getting something like this sort of together. And historically, that would mean that, like, you know, Vanessa and I would like spend some time before the conference, like looking through the booklet and looking online and putting those together ourselves. But we've worked with NCORE in advance, so we have already several pages of that information, and we're going to share that out with anyone who's interested in that. So please feel free to reach out to qtpocncore@gmail.com, and we will be able to share that information with you. Also, again, if you are someone who is interested in the caucus or is someone who is simply maybe invested in the uplift of those communities, email us and we're happy to share some information. Again, we haven't created all the marketing for it yet, but we'll be meeting twice during the conference, and that's one way to kind of go about it. Another thing I think that's really exciting, that's a new initiative, is so last year NCORE launched a salon series, which is a little different than a panel discussion, but more like several people coming together and a community of folks kind of around them, kind of watching them be in conversation about different topics. And there are two salons happening. And the one on Friday evening is actually going to be all about the experiences of Black queer movement makers, practitioners, artists, thinkers who, you know, are openly Black and queer and thinking about the ways those identities like intersect and interplay. Something that I think I can say this. Can I say this, Dedrick? You let me know if I can't. It's going to be taking place off campus. I haven't got stopped yet. Okay, I'll go. It's going to be taking place at in an actual bookstore, so to feel very like removed from the space. And I'm really, really excited about that opportunity for us to really dig deep into an intersection we oftentimes don't get a chance to talk about. It's also going to be intergenerational, so there's going to be like younger folk and older folk all sort of like in flowing with one another. So I think that should be really, really exciting. And that's just some of the things. Like Vanessa said, there are a few other things that are some surprises that we won't say, but there are some things we'll be working on that I think will be really exciting and uplifting, and also remind us about the importance of and the history of QT-POC folk doing movement work, ranging from Baird Rustin, Marsha P. Johnson, the many folks who are Vanessa also is going to be a keynote speaker, and we're going to be explicitly talking about trans Latine experiences. So there's a few larger things that are happening, and I'm always really deeply appreciative of NCORE as they continue to expand for more and ask and listen to the communities who are asking for more. So yeah, those are a few things that are happening, and I really appreciate you all like tapping in this way. I know maybe you were looking for like a workshop, like PowerPoint kind of thing, but you know, as queer folks, why not queer it up a little bit and hopefully have a place that we can be in conversation with you all, as opposed to just some slides that I could share with you all via email. So with that being said, I don't
I'm
know
going
if
to interrupt real
you're
quick,
gonna
Michael.
interrupt. Did I not supposed to say
You are
something?
more than, yes, I'm just going to correct.
Please.
The QT-POC caucus, the QT-POC intergenerational series is Thursday.
My mistake. Oh, I did. Did I say Friday? I
Yeah,
did.
yeah. But
I don't.
everything else is correct, and it's going to be fabulous, darling.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Dedrick. So to be a Thursday night. See, this is, you know, QT-POC solidarity. My sister.
This is community right here.
This is community. Yeah, this is what Audre Lorde was talking about. But yeah, I really appreciate that. It'll be Thursday and not Friday, excuse me. It will be at a coffee shop. I forget the name of it. If Dedrick can come back on and say it, but maybe they won't. That's okay.
Native Books.
Native
Native
Book.
Book.
Thank you. So this would be
Yeah.
a really exciting opportunity to really, I think, get into a salon, as it's like off campus in a different space. It's a really like, you know, activist driven bookstore. There'll be some snacks that will be there too, appetizers. Don't come too hungry, but I will say the bookstore is in Chinatown, so there will be lots of really cool food and bars and stuff in the area. So hopefully we can see you at that. salon on Thursday, not Friday.
Right.
Or at the keynote, or at the variety of other things that are uplifting QT experiences at NCORE. Thank you, Dedrick, for that information and for letting me know that I was a day late.
But
Do
not
y'all-
$1 short.
But sometimes
You're
$1
muted.
short too. But I also want to leave space. Do any of y'all have questions for us? Questions, comments, concerns, and feelings? I also want to name that Vanessa and I are happy to like stay back for a second if you wanted to ask something more intimately. I know that it can be a lot if you're like maneuvering around these identities to maybe ask these questions explicitly. So we're always here to like chat with you one-on-one. But I wanted to leave space for y'all to ask any questions for the last 5 or so minutes. And if not, I'm really excited to see you all at NCORE. Thank you to the NCORE team for allowing us to share this with your communities. Thank you all for being here. I don't know, V, if you want to share anything else.
I want to be mindful of everyone's time. I also imagine folks are joining us while working, and for some folks it's lunch and they have meetings. But just really want to share my appreciation and gratitude for you all for being here and opting into this. And I'm really excited to meet, hold space, and learn also from you all during the conference. Michael and I often walk around the conference, are kind of bopping around. Please come up, say hello, come to sessions, come to caucus if you are a QT BIPOC individual yourself, and really just build community. Community, I always say in my work with students, community is a verb. It's something you have to
Absolutely.
practice and something you have to lean into. And so please lean into us as community, as resources, as support, or if there's folks that you know that are coming to the conference who were not able to attend this webinar, who would benefit from this community, please share all of the information we've shared with you all with them. Share the recording, share the caucus email, and similarly let them know that they can also come up to us during the conference. I'm also going to put my social media in the chat if folks, because some folks like email. I'm also going to put my email. Some folks are more professional. Some folks want the more community thing. So I'll put both ways of communication if folks want to engage in continued conversation leading up to, during, or after NCORE. But thank you so much. With our final time, are there other questions or things that folks wanted to bring in before we pass it over to Dedrick to close us out?
Okay. Thank you, Michael and Vanessa, for a wonderful, wonderful discussion on gender expansiveness at NCORE. I just want to, again, thank you for your expertise and your vulnerability and openness. We will see you in a couple weeks. All of the information that they provided will be available to you online through the app, also through the paper guide that you'll receive when you register. But in the meantime, be safe and have a good time. Okay, well, we're gonna go get ready for the next one. I'll see you guys in like 2 weeks.
We'll see you soon. Thank you all.